Literature reviews, what they are, what they aren't, as well as some do's and don'ts. Many students might not have ever had to do a literature review before, and they can be kind of challenging. This is where the majority of your research comes in. And I want to make sure that everybody knows what's expected, because there are some very, very common pitfalls that people fall into, some mistakes they make. So what are they? What they're not are summaries of your paper, a separate essay about your topic, or your opinion on your topic. Again, the most common pitfall is when people simply go ahead and give me a mini paper. And they load it up with sources and go, okay, well, there's my research. That's not what a literature review is. Don't do this. If you do, I'm going to send it back to you, and you'll have to redo it the right way and resubmit it. A literature review is a summary of what's already been written. What do the experts say about your topic? What do they say about the subtopics of your topic, which we'll talk about subtopics in a minute. What you're going to hear me use the phrase established literature. What's already been written? What do the experts in the field say? It's very important because it establishes the foundation for your ideas, theories, and hypotheses. What's been said already? Now, that sets you up to make your own contribution. And in regards of how people will look at your work, it shows them you know what you're talking about. And also, it's the first step in you becoming part of the literature on the topic. If you wind up going to the PhD level, or maybe as a master's student or someone with a master's, you submit an academic paper to a peer-reviewed journal, there might be people that use that as a source. You might wind up in somebody's footnotes someday. So it's important that you show that you know what you're talking about in addition to making your contribution. Now, how do you write a literature review? Well, the first step is to divide your topic into appropriate subtopics. And you have a little leeway on this. You can kind of pick your subtopics according to what part of the topic you're looking at. One of the works that I wrote was about post-communist democracy in Eastern Europe. Well, the first thing I had to do was define democracy. And much like you see the list in front of you, the first thing I had to do was research the subtopics. And one of them is defining democracy. What is democracy? That one question alone got me past 30 pages. Now, I didn't keep them all, but what I had to do was take a look at what the experts did. What did they say? You know, because there are probably at least 12 to 14 different ideas of what democracy is. I had to go through and present each one of them, compare and contrast them, and then at the very end, very briefly, I decided on what my definition would be for my work. This was contained in a standalone essay. When I broke apart my topic, I broke it apart in 3 or 4 different subtopics, and I wrote that section as if I was just writing a paper about democracy. So I basically sat down and wrote a 24-page paper on democracy, as if the rest of it didn't matter, because all I'm worried about when I'm writing that section is that subtopic. For example, if you're going to divide your topic into appropriate subtopics, and your topic is what is the best style of pizza, you're going to break it down into different subtopics. You might start out with the sauce. You might go ahead and have another subtopic being the crust, because there's different kinds of crust, right? There's thin, there's thick. Then, of course, toppings. You know, there's the folks who have pineapple and ham on their pizza. There's folks that like meat lovers pizza. There's even places like St. Louis that have a special cheese that you can only get there. So, you know, toppings is important. Then, of course, different places, Detroit and Chicago, have different kinds of pans. That could be one of your subtopics. And what I would do is go through and I would write a essay, a summary of what other people had written about the different sauces. I would finish it up with a short conclusion of my own, concluding what I think the best sauce is based on what they had written. And I would do the same for crust. I would do the same for toppings. I would do the same for, you know, perhaps baking pans or how they're cooked. And you want to research each topic separately. And this is an important point. Use different types of sources. Make sure your sources are diverse. No one likes reading a paper whose literature review is nothing more than a collection of government documents. You need to go ahead and elicit articles from peer-reviewed journals. You might look in some books depending on the topic. Some topics move too quickly to be appropriately covered in books. International politics is like that. We write books, but they're largely shorter, about 180 pages. We turn them out quickly because if you haven't ever done it, getting a book published can take up to over 2 years. The quickest I've ever seen a book published is 9 months. Well, in many cases, in international politics, things move so quickly, 9 months, something's already antiquated. It's not really useful. But make sure your sources are diverse: books, articles, government publications. Be very careful about using blogs. Be very careful about who your authors are. I can't stress this enough. There are many people who like to claim that they're experts about something and they're not. Turn on MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, News Nation, and you will hear these journalists act like they have degrees in political science and economics. They don't. Okay? Now, I know they've reported on them for a long time, and that's fine. That doesn't make them political scientists. That doesn't make them economists. But keep that in mind. Now, there are people who are experts, who have held positions, who have degrees, who've done writing and research, who do have blogs, who do have websites, and those are fine. Make sure you scrutinize your sources. When you write these essays, write each section as if you're summarizing what is written about each subtopic, and use headers to separate them. This is one challenge that a lot of people run into. Get away from writing a story and get away from writing a persuasive essay. You're doing pure research here. There won't be transitions. You're gonna, again, if you're gonna write about pizza crust, you're gonna write about the different kinds of crusts. You're gonna conclude what you think is the best crust in relation to what was written, and you're gonna move on. You'll enter a period and then space, and then you'll move on to toppings, if you want to use our example. You do want to compare and contrast them, okay? If you have an article or you have a section on the different kind of pizza pans, you can talk about the Detroit pan, you can talk about the Chicago pan. I'm not sure if New York has a special kind of pan, or I know St. Louis doesn't. But you want to go ahead, compare and contrast, and then again, which one do you think is best if you're going to write about pizza? The final steps: go ahead and combine each of the separate essays on each subtopic into one document. Simply cut and paste them one after the other with the headers on them. Then include a reference list at the end. Last but not least, and these are two very important tips. First, make sure you use internal citations and a reference list. And again, do not make it a short summary of your topic. If you do either one of these two things, I'm sending it back to you ungraded, and you'll have to redo it. If there are any questions, let me know.